Hey everybody, welcome to Quick Tip Tuesday. Today is the day I'm hoping to sign, seal, and deliver my instructions to the printer for my shorts. I'm very excited about that. I have a few last things that I need to do to the actual pattern sheet, and then I'm hoping to have the whole thing ready by the end of the week. I'm really excited. And because I've been doing so much computer work, I haven't really done any sewing or anything that I could grab a quick tip from. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you something about my shorts pattern and trying it on the bias. It's not something I'm currently working on, and it's not part of my actual pattern. But if you have a pattern in your stash that you are wondering, I wonder if I could, make this on the bias instead of the straight of grain, I'm just going to show you what I'm going to do with my pattern to do that, and how you can find the bias grain line, for example, if your pattern is already marked for the straight of grain. And then I'm going to just quickly cut those out. So my quick tip for today is how to take a straight grain pattern, mark it on the bias grain line, and cut it out. I'm going to use my short pattern, and this pattern is a cutoff version of the long shorts in my pattern. So it's something I'm working on, and I thought, wouldn't it be fun to try it on the bias? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to find the bias grain line using your straight of grain line. And the easiest way to do that is to use a quilting ruler, because it's got this 1-inch grid that makes it really easy. So what you want to do first of all is locate your straight of grain. And I'm going to turn my pattern over because I've already made such a mess of it on the right side. I'm just going to get my straight of grain. If I want to find the bias grain line for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my quilting ruler on there, and I'm going to line up the diagonal points of the squares on the grid on the ruler. I'm going to line those up with my straight of grain line. So you can see I'm lining them up. See how all those intersections are matching perfectly? Okay, when your ruler is lined up like that with the straight of grain line, the edge of the ruler is your bias. So this would be your bias grain line. Bias grain, okay? Now, on the opposite pattern piece, let me just fold that one back. Okay, I'm gonna go in the opposite direction. Okay, so I have my grain pointing this way on the back piece. Let's have it going the opposite way on the front piece. And see how I've lined up right along the opposite corners of these squares on this grid? I'm going to slide it down a little bit though. I see how that's lined up? That's my bias grain line. Okay, so now I want to cut these out, and when you work with bias garments tend to stretch down and get longer because you're taking advantage of the stretch along the bias grain line of your fabric. So if you're working with a non-stretch fabric and you're cutting it out on the bias, then it will be stretchy across the width of the piece. And what will happen is it will cause it to lengthen and get longer. So I'm going to have to play with this a little bit. I may need to shorten the rise a little bit once I get them on and let them sort of hang for a little bit. But the other thing is you may need more ease. So what I'm going to do when I cut out these shorts is I'm just going to add an extra 1/2 inch seam allowance, and that will allow me to let it out if I need to. So I'm not going to trace a new pattern. I'm just going to make a note here, add 1/2 inch to side seam when cutting on bias. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my pieces on, and I'm just going to cut them out 1/2 inch away from the edge on the side seam. So just add 1/2 inch when cutting on bias. Okay, and then after I check these shorts, and let's say I sew them up and they're perfect and I love them, Then I will make a separate bias pattern and I'll adjust the side seam as necessary. So basically, just very quickly, this is a quick review on how to lay your pieces out on the bias. What you want to do is you want to line your bias grain line up so that it's parallel to the selvage of your fabric. So you're doing the exact same thing. If I were doing the straight of grain, I would do my straight of grain parallel to the selvage. But in this case, I'm going to cut them out so that the bias grain line is parallel with the selvage. All right, so the quick way to do that is to measure one side of the grain line over here. And you can see down here, it's 9 inches. So I'm just gonna put a weight there. Let me just measure this one. And I'm gonna put my ruler so that it's 9 inches here. And then all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna pivot my pattern piece until it is 9 inches there as well. All right, so now I know that this pattern piece is laying on the bias and I can cut it out. So just to quickly show you, I'm going to use my ruler and I'm just going to add that 1/2 inch that I want, that's like I sort of have for safety. And I'm just going to draw it right on my fabric. That way I know where I'm cutting out without having to create a new pattern piece. You know, and it may be I won't need it. I don't know. I have to see how this works. But in any case, so there's my new, my new side seam. I'll cut these out and I'll try them on and I'll let you know how that worked out on Thursday. So that'll give us a plan for the week. So if you have any questions about bias grain line or straight grain line, or if you're working with a pattern and you've tried to make it bias and it was originally a straight pattern and you have questions, or if you have pictures of something you've worked on and you want to post those, that would be super fun. So please visit my blog at jsterndesigns.com and leave me a question if you need to, or a comment. And I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you for Quick Tip Thursday.